Princess Lyra of the Empire stood at the edge of the high cliff, staring down at the vast silver sands that stretched to the horizon. The twin suns of her planet reflected off her pale, shimmering robes, making her look almost like a mirage. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that she was a princess, a leader, someone trained for control and poise. But inside, her heart thudded like a war drum, her chest tight with nerves she could not hide. The Empire had faced attacks from for months now, and every day brought new threats. Lyra had spent her life preparing for situations like this, yet standing alone, exposed, she felt the weight of responsibility crush her. Every decision she made could cost lives. Every hesitation could mean defeat. She had learned to hide her feelings from advisors, soldiers, and even family, but now, as the wind whipped her hair across her face, a new kind of unease spread through her. A soft sound behind her made her turn. A human figure approached across the sands, moving with steady purpose. Lyra had never met a human before, and their reputation had reached her only through cautious whispers. They were said to be brave, unpredictable, and fiercely loyal to those they trusted. The figure stopped a few feet from her, his tall frame outlined by the glowing sunlight. Armor covered his chest, reflecting the light, but his face was calm, almost gentle. His eyes, dark and curious, met hers. Lyra's chest tightened again. She had been trained to show no fear, to hide every twitch of her emotion, yet something about him made it impossible. She tried to straighten her posture, to lift her chin, but the moment their eyes locked, her thoughts scattered. The human didn't bow in the traditional way, nor did he speak immediately. He just looked at her, patient and unassuming. For a second, Lyra felt small, not as a princess, but as a being who wanted to be seen and understood. "I am," the human said finally, his voice steady but warm. "I am here to help." His words were simple, but they carried an honesty Lyra wasn't used to. No hidden agendas, no formalities that twisted meaning, just plain truth. She wanted to respond with the same composed dignity she always maintained, yet her throat felt tight. Her hands, folded neatly at her waist, trembled slightly, betraying the calm she tried to show. You are far from home," Lyra said carefully, her voice almost a whisper. "How did you find our world?" His lips curved slightly in what might have been a smile. "Humans have ways, but I am not here to conquer or to spy. I am here to protect you." The words made her pause. Protect her. Not her kingdom, not her title, but her. A rush of conflicting emotions hit her like a wave. Relief, disbelief, curiosity, and something more fragile that she had never allowed herself to feel in public: gratitude. Lyra's training told her to hide it, to remain untouchable. Yet she felt her body respond anyway. Her heartbeat quickened, her stomach fluttered, and her hands clenched slightly. Seemed to notice, his eyes softening as if he understood everything she tried to keep locked away. The wind carried sand around them, shimmering in the dying sunlight, and for a brief moment Lyra felt as if the world had stopped. She was a princess, born for power, surrounded by enemies, yet standing here her walls were cracking. She wanted to retreat, to put on her mask of icy composure, but she couldn't. His presence demanded honesty, even in silence. And so she stood there, staring at him, letting the heat of her own emotions show where no one else had ever seen them. She did not know if it was bravery or folly, but for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of being alive, not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but simply as Lyra. The twin suns dipped lower, casting long shadows across the sands. Lyra's mind raced with questions about this human, this strange warrior from another world. She did not know what the future would bring, but for now she felt something unfamiliar: hope. The next morning, Lyra walked through the high corridors of the palace, her robes brushing the polished floors. Every step echoed in the empty halls, a reminder of the solitude she often felt despite the grandeur around her. She was a princess, trained to lead, to remain strong, to never let emotions cloud judgment. Yet the human warrior had changed something in her already. The memory of his steady gaze haunted her thoughts, making her pulse quicken at times she didn't expect. Followed her silently, a few steps behind, his presence calm yet alert. He observed the palace guards, the security measures, and the flow of Lyra's steps, as if he were reading her in ways no one else could. Lyra had seen warriors before, soldiers, commanders, even some from allied planets, but was different. He moved with confidence, yet there was patience in every gesture, a respect that made her chest tighten. She hated how easily he unsettled her. "You seem tense," said quietly, breaking the silence. "Do you need rest?" Lyra blinked at him, startled. She had trained herself to ignore such remarks, but his tone carried no judgment, no condescension, just understanding. Her lips parted, but she forced a polite, measured reply. "I am fine. The palace, it is my responsibility," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. His dark eyes didn't leave her. "Responsibility doesn't mean you must carry it alone. Even leaders need support." Support. The word echoed in her mind. She had never allowed herself to think of anyone supporting her in this way. Not her advisors, not her family, and certainly not anyone from another world. And yet, she felt a strange pull toward him, a desire to trust, to rely on someone she barely knew. Her fingers twitched under the sleeves of her robe, betraying her carefully maintained calm. As they approached the training grounds, Lyra felt a familiar mix of excitement and dread. Today was supposed to be a demonstration of skill and strategy a simple test to show him how warriors operated. But Lyra knew this would also test her own self-control. She had to maintain her image, stay composed, and never show that she could be shaken. The training began with light exercises. Soldiers performed maneuvers and observed with keen eyes, nodding here, frowning there. Lyra watched him, nodding the subtle ways he noticed patterns others missed. He moved with precision, even when performing nothing more than a demonstration. She couldn't help but feel admiration rising inside her, mingling with the anxiety she fought to suppress. When finally asked her to join the drills, Lyra hesitated. She was a princess, trained in diplomacy more than battle, but she could not refuse. As she stepped forward, the eyes of her soldiers followed, some skeptical, some curious. Her chest tightened and her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her stance. Gaze met hers, calm and encouraging, and for a moment she felt a flicker of courage she hadn't known before. The exercises were simple at first, then progressively more challenging. Lyra struggled at moments, misjudging distances, overextending her movements, and each time she felt her composure slipping. Her cheeks flushed, her breath quickened, and her usual cool mask faltered. Remained patient, guiding her with quiet words and subtle demonstrations. She realized she had never been treated with such gentleness by anyone in authority before. By the end of the session, sweat and dust clung to her robes, her hair was tangled, and her heart pounded like a drum. But she also felt something new, pride, connection, and a warmth she could not fully name. His presence had been a strange mirror, showing her that strength and emotion could coexist. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Lyra found herself standing closer to than she had intended. Their eyes met again, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, honest smile. It was a smile she could not hide, no matter how hard she tried. Nodded, noticing the change. "Good work today, princess. You handled more than just the exercises, you handled yourself." Lyra's chest rose and fell rapidly. For the first time she realized that her emotions, long considered a weakness, could also be a strength. They made her real. They made her human, even in ways her own people might never understand. And she knew, deep down, that had seen it all, and had not judged. The night came quietly over the plains, but Lyra did not feel peace. Even with the palace walls glowing softly under the twin moons, a sharp tension coiled in her chest. She had expected calm, but had warned her that danger could appear at any moment. She tried to steady her breathing, to keep her posture regal and controlled, but the shadows around her seemed to whisper of unseen threats. Walked beside her, silent and alert, his human instincts sensing what her eyes could not see. Lyra noticed how easily he moved through the shadows, every step careful yet confident. Her heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from the strange mix of admiration and anxiety that clung to her like a second skin. She hated how he unsettled her, yet she couldn't deny the relief she felt with him nearby. Suddenly, a sharp flash of movement caught his eye. Without warning, figures emerged from the darkness, warriors, silent and swift. They had surrounded the path, cutting off escape. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Her hands instinctively went to her robe, seeking some symbol of authority or weapon, but she had none ready. Panic threatened to rise, but stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Stay behind me, princess," he ordered, energy blades igniting in his hands. Lyra tried to obey, but her feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the ground. She watched move with precision, deflecting strikes and pushing attackers back with a combination of strength and strategy she had never seen before. Every swing of his blades was controlled, yet filled with raw power. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, a mix of fear and awe threatening to betray her usual composure. One warrior lunged at her. Lyra froze, unable to react fast enough. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm and pulling her out of the attack's path. She stumbled, and for a fleeting moment she allowed herself to meet his gaze. Relief flooded her, followed by an awareness of something she couldn't name. Her cheeks warmed, her heart thundered, and she realized she had been holding her breath for too long. "You're safe," said softly, even as he continued to fight. "Stay close." Lyra's hands clenched at her sides, trembling despite her efforts. She had tried to stay calm, tried to be the untouchable princess, but in this moment, every emotion she had buried for years bubbled to the surface. Fear, gratitude, admiration, and a strange, fragile trust, all of it mixed into a whirlwind she could not contain. She noticed how seemed to move almost instinctively around her, predicting danger, shielding her, giving her space to breathe in the chaos. She had never known anyone who cared so little for formality and so much for her life. Her chest tightened again, this time with something closer to awe than panic. As the fight dragged on, Lyra realized something remarkable. She could feel her own power, even in the shadow of skill. Watching him inspired her. She moved, instinctively ducking and dodging, lending herself to the rhythm of battle. She was no soldier, not in the formal sense, but under his presence she found a courage she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. Finally, the last of the warriors fell back, retreating into the darkness from which they had emerged. Lowered his blades, chest heaving slightly, and turned to Lyra. Her robes were dusty, her hair tangled, her cheeks flushed. She tried to hide it, tried to straighten, but he noticed. "You did well," said, voice calm but firm. "More than you know." Lyra's hands shook slightly as she nodded. For the first time, she understood that strength was not only in control, but also in letting someone see her vulnerability and still stand by her side. In that quiet moment after the chaos, she realized that had not only protected her body but had opened a door to her heart. And she knew deep down that her life and her world would never be the same. The dawn broke softly over the palace, painting the sky in hues of gold and violet. Lyra sat alone in her private chambers, her robes still dusted with the remnants of the night's battle. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a heavy exhaustion in its place, but her mind refused to rest. Every detail of the fight replayed endlessly. The way he had moved, the calm precision of his strikes, the way his gaze had never left her once, even in the midst of chaos. Her fingers traced the edge of her desk, seeking some distraction from the storm of thoughts. She had always been taught that a princess's strength lay in composure, in the ability to hide her emotions beneath layers of duty and protocol. But now, after it had saved her, she realized that her carefully constructed mask felt brittle, as if it could shatter at any moment. Entered quietly, closing the door softly behind him. He had that same calm presence, the one that unsettled her and yet made her feel grounded. He didn't speak at first. He simply observed her, noticing the small details, the slight trembling of her hands, the flush on her cheeks, the way her eyes darted toward him and then quickly away. "You didn't have to fight so close to me," Lyra said finally, her voice low and uneven. She tried to force it into calm authority, but it came out as a whisper of uncertainty. Shook his head, I am trained to fight. Protecting you isn't just part of my duty, it's instinct." His dark eyes softened. "But I also saw how you moved. You were not helpless." Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to appear composed, to let only her title speak for her, but the words tore through her carefully maintained restraint. I've never felt like that before. Afraid, but brave too," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance but allowing his presence to be felt. "It's human to feel. Fear, courage, relief, they exist together. You don't have to hide them." Lyra swallowed hard. The honesty in his voice made her heart pound. She had spent her life concealing vulnerability, afraid that anyone who saw it would take advantage. And yet here was a human, someone from another world, seeing her fully and not retreating. She felt a mix of gratitude and something more fragile, something that made her feel exposed in the best way. "I've always been taught that emotions are dangerous," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "That a princess must be untouchable, but with you, I feel something I can't name, and I can't hide it no matter how I try." Nodded, his expression understanding. "That's not weakness. Feeling makes you strong. It's the reason you survived last night, the reason you keep leading. Emotions are part of your power, not a flaw." Lyra's lips parted and a small, tentative smile appeared. It felt strange to smile so openly, to let herself be seen without the barrier of duty or fear. I don't know if I can do this. Let people see me like this, but with you it feels different, safe." His expression softened further, a rare and gentle human smile crossing his face. "Then trust it, trust yourself, and trust me." Lyra's chest rose and fell with deep breaths. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax, to let the weight of control slip just enough to feel the truth of her own heart. Gratitude, fear, admiration, and something tender, something she dared not yet name, flowed together, unrestrained. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the dust in her robes, the lines of exhaustion on her face, and the raw honesty in her eyes. Remained a silent witness, offering neither judgment nor intrusion, simply standing there as she allowed herself to be fully human. And in that quiet room, Lyra understood a truth she had never dared admit. Sometimes, true strength came not from hiding emotion but from letting someone see it and still choosing to stand tall. The palace was quiet that evening, but Lyra felt an unease she couldn't shake. Something in the air felt sharp, like the calm before a storm. Walked beside her along the grand halls, his senses alert, every step measured. Lyra tried to appear composed, but her chest tightened with a warning she couldn't ignore. The attacks from had been relentless, and now, with the strange calm of the palace, she realized danger could come from anywhere, even within her own walls. They reached the private council chamber, where Lyra had called a meeting of her closest aides. She trusted them, or at least she thought she did, stayed just behind her, scanning the room with quiet vigilance. Lyra tried to focus on her advisor's words, but her mind wandered to the warmth of his presence, the steady way he had stayed at her side during the last ambush. She hated to admit it, but she felt safer with him than she had with anyone in the court. The discussion was tense but routine. Plans to fortify the borders, strategies for communication with allies, and updates on the movements. Lyra listened carefully, trying to maintain her composure, but a small flicker of doubt kept tugging at her. Then, without warning, one of her trusted aides, and named, slammed his hand onto the table. "You don't understand, Princess. They are stronger than you think. You should leave the planet." His voice was loud, sharp, almost desperate. His eyes avoided hers, and for the first time Lyra noticed a flicker of something dark behind them. Betrayal. Before she could respond, a sudden blast rocked the chamber. Energy shields flared and the room filled with smoke and sparks. Reacted instantly, positioning himself between Lyra and the chaos. Lyra's heart raced. The betrayal was real, had secretly allied with forces, opening the palace gates from within. The trusted aide, the familiar face she had confided in, had turned against her. Lyra's hands trembled despite her efforts to stay regal. She wanted to command her guards to act like the untouchable princess, but fear clawed at her throat. Steady voice cut through her panic. "Stay close, follow me," he ordered, igniting his energy blades. Lyra barely moved at first, frozen by shock, but the determination in his eyes snapped something inside her. She stepped forward, pushing aside the panic. She was not helpless, not entirely. By her side, she felt a courage she hadn't realized she possessed. Together, they moved through the chaos. Deflected attacks, his blades moving with fluid precision, while Lyra directed the palace guards as best she could, her voice shaking yet commanding. Each step they took brought them closer to regaining control of the chamber, and each time glanced at her, she felt the same strange mix of relief, admiration, and something tender stirring in her chest. Finally, the last intruder fell, retreating into the dark corridors of the palace. Lyra leaned against the wall, exhausted, her robes torn and dusty. She tried to hide the quiver in her hands, the rapid rise and fall of her chest, but noticed anyway. He approached, lowering his blades, and gave her a small, reassuring nod. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "Even in the midst of betrayal, you held yourself. You didn't falter completely." Lyra's lips parted in a weary but genuine smile. The fear and adrenaline still burned in her veins, but beneath it all, she felt something new, a sense of strength she had never allowed herself to claim. Had not only protected her physically, but he had also reminded her that courage could exist even in the shadow of treachery. For the first time, she realized that being a princess was not just about command or ceremony. It was about facing the unexpected, standing firm in the midst of fear, and allowing someone to see her as she truly was, and still having the courage to rise. As the twin moons bathed the chamber in silver light, Lyra met's gaze. She no longer felt the crushing weight of solitude. She knew now that even in betrayal she could find allies, and that sometimes true strength came from trusting the right person with the deepest parts of her heart. The day after the betrayal, Lyra wandered alone through the palace gardens. The flowers were strange and alien, their petals glowing faintly under the twin suns, but she barely noticed them. Her thoughts were tangled, spinning with the events of the night before. The attacks, betrayal, unwavering protection, all of it left her feeling exposed, yet strangely alive. She had always carried herself with a rigid poise, but now that mask felt fragile, unnecessary, even unwanted. Followed quietly, giving her space while keeping close enough to protect her. Lyra realized that his presence was no longer just reassuring, it was grounding. The strength he radiated made her feel safe, but it also made her aware of her own vulnerability, a vulnerability she had never allowed anyone to witness. She hated how much it unsettled her, yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward him. "You've been quiet," said softly, breaking the silence. "It's not just the attack, is it?" Lyra looked up at him, startled by the accuracy of his observation. She had tried to bury her feelings under layers of discipline, but he saw through it anyway. I don't know how to explain," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've spent my life hiding every emotion. Pride, fear, doubt. I've never let anyone see the real me. Not my advisors, not my family. And yet, with you, I can't hide it." Stepped closer, keeping his expression gentle. "That's because I don't want you to hide it. Humans, well, at least some of us, believe that emotions are a strength, not a weakness. You don't have to be perfect to lead. You just have to be real." Lyra's chest tightened. Real. It was a simple word, but it carried weight she had never felt before. She had been trained to be untouchable, to inspire awe and fear in others, yet here was a human telling her that being truly seen was more powerful than any ceremony or title. Her hands trembled slightly, and she looked away, afraid her face would betray her. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed quietly. "To be open, to let someone see me, it's frightening." He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His touch was light, careful, and completely non-threatening, yet it sent a shiver through her. "You're stronger than you think," he said simply. "You survived the betrayal. You stood tall when others faltered, and you're still standing now. That's courage, princess. That's real strength. Lyra felt a warmth bloom in her chest, spreading through her like sunlight. She realized that she had been measuring strength all wrong, not by control or perfection, but by the courage to feel, to act, and to trust. And somehow had shown her that. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile freely, a small, honest smile that carried relief, gratitude, and a budding affection she could barely name. "I've never met anyone like you," she said, voice soft but steady. "You make me feel safe, even when everything around me is chaos." His dark eyes softened and he nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. "That's the human way," he said. "We fight, we protect, we feel, and sometimes we teach others to do the same." Lyra laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar to her own ears, but it felt good. She realized then that had not only saved her life physically, but had also given her something far rarer, the courage to embrace her own emotions. She could be strong and vulnerable at the same time, and she could share that truth with someone she trusted. As the twin suns set, casting golden and violet light across the gardens, Lyra felt a shift inside her. Fear and doubt were still there, yes, but beneath them was something steadier: hope. Hope that she could lead not just as a symbol of power, but as a being who felt, who cared, and who could trust. And most importantly, hope that she could trust, the human warrior who had entered her life and changed it in ways she could barely yet comprehend. The twin suns were sinking low over, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of gold and violet. Lyra stood on the palace balcony, her robes catching the last rays of sunlight. The world below hummed with life, rebuilding after the attacks. Her chest rose and fell steadily, but her mind wandered to the events that had shaped the last weeks: the ambush, the betrayal, the fear, and most importantly, approached silently, his footsteps soft against the marble floor. Lyra did not turn immediately. She wanted to savor the moment, the quiet before words. When she finally looked at him, she saw the same calm, steady presence that had anchored her through storms, both literal and emotional. His armor gleamed faintly in the dying sunlight, but his expression was gentle, patient, full of understanding. "You look at peace," said quietly. "Is it because the palace is safe or because the world is quiet?" Lyra smiled, a small curve of her lips, but it carried a depth of emotion she had never shown publicly. "Perhaps a little of both," she said, her voice soft. "But mostly it's because you are here." His dark eyes met hers, and for the first time Lyra allowed herself to fully acknowledge the connection between them. It was more than admiration, more than trust. It was a bond formed in battle, in fear, in honesty. Her emotions, which had once felt like a weakness, now felt like the bridge that brought them together. Lyra took a deep breath. "I used to think that being strong meant never showing fear, never letting anyone see doubt. But now I understand. True strength is being seen and still standing." Nodded slowly. "That is strength, and it's something only a few can teach. You've already learned it, Lyra. You just had to let yourself." The wind stirred around them, lifting strands of her hair. Lyra stepped closer to, her heart pounding in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. She felt the weight of everything she had carried, the responsibility of her title, the grief of betrayal, the fear of loss, lighten in his presence. He had become her anchor, steady and unyielding, yet gentle enough to let her lean. She whispered, almost to herself, "I don't want to hide anymore, not from the world and not from you." He reached out, lightly touching her hand. The contact was simple, yet it sent warmth through her entire body. "Then don't," he said. "Stand with me and let the world see all of who you are." Lyra's eyes glistened in the fading sunlight. She felt a surge of emotions: pride, relief, courage, and a fragile, growing hope. All of it intertwined into a clarity she had never known. She realized that the path ahead would not be easy, would face more threats, more challenges, and more betrayals. But she also knew that she was no longer alone. Together they looked out over the horizon, the twin suns melting into the clouds, casting long shadows across the city below. Lyra felt a strange peace. She was a princess, yes, but she was also human, vulnerable, and alive, and with by her side she could face anything. Finally, she allowed herself a small, genuine laugh. It was light, unguarded, and full of warmth, a sound that belonged to someone who had discovered a new kind of strength. Smiled in return, understanding exactly what she meant without a word. As the last light of day faded, Lyra leaned slightly toward him and mirrored her gesture. They stood together in silence, a symbol of trust, courage, and the bond between two beings from different worlds. In that moment, Lyra realized something profound. Humans, in their raw courage and open hearts, could teach even an alien princess the power of connection, emotion, and hope. The sun set, leaving the sky awash in violet and silver. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, feeling the warmth of his presence. For the first time, she was not just a princess defending her people. She was someone who had learned to feel, to trust, and to stand fully alive. And in that quiet, perfect moment, Lyra knew the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace.